Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Let me say for a second, since one of the things that you guys have been talking about all day is relocalization, let me talk about that just for a minute, because though I spend my time now and energy doing this kind of global organizing, my intellectual energy is really devoted to the thing that interests me and that I've been writing about most of the time recently, and things are precisely these questions of how we're going to relocalize economies and lives. And I think these two things turn out to be intimately connected in the most powerful ways. The reason that our lives look the way that they do, the reason more than anything else that we live in the hyper-globalized and hyper-individualized world that we live in, is because we've had access to huge amounts of cheap fossil fuel for a long time. Okay? That's done a number of things. It made us rich, it's wrecking the climate, it's allowed us to sprawl out, in all directions. Maybe most tragically, in a sense, having all that access to endless cheap fossil fuel has allowed us to become the first members of our species not to have any practical need of our neighbors for anything, to be able to divorce ourselves from everyone around us. I mean, just think of what the American dream has consisted of for the last 50 years. Essentially, most of our economic activity has been devoted to building bigger houses farther apart from each other. And we viewed that as the kind of American dream. And it's taken a huge environmental toll, obviously, because it takes a lot of energy to do that. But it's also just taken a huge social toll. The average American has half as many close friends on average as the average American 50 years ago. If you'd been sitting there 50 years ago, on average you would have had twice as many people with whom you were close. That's a horrible thing to sort of contemplate, in a sense. The average American eats meals with friends and family and neighbors half as often as they did 50 years ago. Our lives have been in many ways deeply impoverished, and it's no wonder that Americans say that they're far less satisfied with their lives when people do surveys than they were 50 years ago, even though our material standard of living has trebled over that period of time. We went past a point where it made sense to be increasing our standard of living instead of paying attention to what we were doing. And the way back from that is partly the slow, patient work of rebuilding those institutions. It's partly the slow, patient work of starting farmers markets and so on and so forth. In fact, farmers markets are the perfect example, because it's not so much, I mean, the attraction of them is, yes, the nice vegetables and things, but the real attraction of them is a pair of sociologists followed shoppers a couple of years ago. First around the supermarket, then around the farmers market. You all been to the supermarket? You know how it works. You walk in, you fall into a light fluorescent trance, you visit the Stations of the Cross around the market, that's it. When they followed people around the farmer's market, on average they had 10 times more conversations per visit. That's the real work that's going on there. Yes, some sort of root vegetable distribution, but also some community re-knitting together, and that's the reason we like them so much, because that's how human beings have, shopped for food for 10,000 years. It fits well with what we evolved to do. So that slow, patient work is very important, but it'll be a lot easier and it'll happen a lot faster if we combine it with some change at the global scale. The same thing that we need to do to rein in climate change, put a price on carbon, is also the same thing we need to do to dramatically speed that relocalization. The reason that we eat food that travels on average 2,000 miles before it reaches our lips is because we have access to endless amounts of cheap oil. And the minute that we don't, the minute that that oil carries the cost that it should to reflect the damage it does in the atmosphere, is the day when the farmer's market makes sense, not just because the food is good and the conversation is good, but because everybody can figure out that in any rational way, it's economically more sensible to have tomato travel 5 miles instead of 5,000, you know? Getting the economic wind behind our backs instead of always in our face, making the economic force of gravity work to build local food, local energy systems, all of that is incredibly important. And it's very much the same work as trying to slow down this ruinous climate change, which if we don't slow down, no matter how beautifully we build our communities, we can't build them to survive change at the upper end of the possibilities for global warming. Doesn't matter how wonderful your vegetable garden is, it still has to rain sometime, you know, for you to grow something on it. And so we've got to do this work in tandem, local and global. And so I'm incredibly grateful to you all for taking some of your energy and effort and devoting it not just to doing things close to home, but devoting it to doing things on a large global scale too, to helping. And I'm not the only one who's grateful for that. The other people who are grateful to hear and see you doing that and who will be really grateful are people in other parts of the world who need to hear back that we're hearing their message.